I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what day it was. I didn't even know, for a few terrifying seconds, if I was still alive. My chest felt like someone had opened it up, rearranged everything inside, and sewn it back together wrong. And the first thing I thought before the fear, before the confusion, before any of it was, Marcus must be so worried about me. I actually thought that. I know. My name is Sophia. I'm 32 years old. I used to be a kindergarten art teacher in Portland, Oregon. I used to believe in people. I used to believe that if you loved someone hard enough, they loved you back the same way. I'm going to tell you a story today, my story, and I need you to stay with me until the end, because it starts in a hospital bed, and it ends with everything. I need you to understand who I was before any of this happened, because I think it matters. I grew up in foster care. I was placed with the Whitfield family when I was 3 years old, and they were kind, genuinely kind, but kind and permanent aren't always the same thing. I aged out of the system at 18 with one suitcase, a community college acceptance letter, and a very stubborn belief that I was going to be okay. I put myself through school. I got my teaching certificate. I got a studio apartment in Portland that cost more than it should have and smelled faintly of the previous tenant's cigarettes. And I loved it. I painted the walls yellow without asking permission. I hung my own artwork everywhere. I bought plants that I talked to when I was lonely. I was lonely a lot, if I'm being honest. That's important context for what came next. I met Marcus Hargrove at a gallery opening on a rainy Thursday night in October. I almost didn't go. I was tired. I'd spent the day teaching 5-year-olds how to paint sunflowers, and all I wanted to do was go home, eat cereal over the sink, and watch something stupid on TV. But my friend Danny had extra tickets, and she practically dragged me there. Marcus was standing in front of a watercolor landscape, holding a glass of red wine, and when I walked past him he said, without even turning to look at me, "The brushwork on the left side is too deliberate." Like the artist was afraid of it. I stopped. I said, "Most people just say they like the blue parts." He looked at me then, and he smiled. That was it. That was the moment. We talked for 3 hours. He was brilliant and funny, and he asked questions about me like he was genuinely interested in the answers, which, in my experience, was rare. By our 4th date, I had convinced myself he was exactly what my lonely, yellow-walled apartment had been waiting for. We got married 18 months later.
Small ceremony.
Danny was my maid of honor. Marcus's best man was a colleague from his real estate firm. I remember thinking, standing at the altar, that I had finally made something permanent. I had no idea what was already being planned. It started about 8 months into our marriage. I'd been having these little episodes, dizzy spells mostly, a fluttering in my chest sometimes, occasional headaches that felt like pressure instead of pain. I chalked it up to stress. Teaching is exhausting. We'd also just moved into a larger apartment, and the mortgage was tight. I wasn't sleeping great. Marcus was attentive. He started making me chamomile tea every night before bed. Said the routine would help. Said it would calm my nervous system. He made it himself, every night, without me asking. He'd bring it to wherever I was, the couch, the bedroom, my desk, and he'd set it down, and sometimes he'd squeeze my shoulder and say, "You work too hard." I thought it was love. I thought, here is a man who pays attention. Here is a man who shows up in the small ways. So I drank my tea every night. For 6 months, I drank my tea every night. And every morning, I woke up feeling slightly worse than the day before. I told myself it was the seasons changing. Then I told myself it was anemia. Then I told myself I needed to exercise more. I told myself a lot of things. The one thing I never told myself, the one possibility I never once considered, was that the man bringing me that tea was the reason I was sick. How do you suspect that? How do you look at someone who tucks you in and says, "Sleep well," and think, this person is killing me? You don't. Until you wake up in a hospital and the evidence is impossible to ignore.
It was a Tuesday, February.
Cold and gray the way Portland only gets in February. I was standing at the front of my classroom, helping my kids set up for morning circle time. Little Amara had glitter on her nose. I remember that specifically. She'd been doing a project the afternoon before, and the glitter never fully came off. I was about to tell her when the room tilted. Not dramatically. Not like in the movies. It was subtle, like the floor dropped an inch and my body didn't get the memo. And then nothing. I woke up on the floor.
There were small faces above me.
5-year-old faces, wide with a kind of fear that children shouldn't have to feel. MS Sophia? Miss Sophia, are you sleeping? That was Oliver. He always asked questions in twos. I tried to answer him. I couldn't. I was told later that I was on the floor for less than 4 minutes before the paramedics arrived. That the school had a defibrillator in the main office. That my heart stopped twice before the ambulance reached St. Meridian Medical Center.
Twice.
I didn't know any of that in the moment. In the moment, there was just darkness, thick and oddly calm, and somewhere underneath it, the muffled sound of children's voices. I had emergency cardiac surgery that afternoon. The surgeons found severe arrhythmia and significant cardiac damage, the kind, they said, that takes months to develop. I survived. And when I opened my eyes in the ICU, the first thing I said was Marcus's name. I want to tell you about the 24 hours after I woke up. Because sometimes I think this is the part people underestimate the calculated precision of it. This wasn't a man who panicked. This was a man who planned. The first blow came from a nurse named Paula. She was kind about it the way people are kind about impossible things. She sat down next to my bed and she held my hand and she said, "Mrs. Hargrove, I need to let you know that your insurance claim has been flagged. It looks like your policy was canceled 48 hours ago." I stared at her. 48 hours ago, I had been at home making coffee. 48 hours ago, Marcus had kissed me on the cheek and told me he was heading to a showing. There must be a mistake, I said. "We're looking into it," Paula told me. Her eyes said, "There's no mistake." The second blow came when I called Marcus. It rang twice. A woman answered. Her voice was smooth and unhurried, like she'd been expecting this call. She said, "Marcus isn't available. And honestly, you shouldn't be calling this number anymore. You're no longer his concern." I didn't speak. She hung up. I sat in my hospital bed with a phone in my hand and a chest full of surgical wire, and I tried to understand what had just happened. I called our home number. Disconnected. I called his cell again. Voicemail. The third blow came from our bank. I had them pull up our joint account. I'd been a co-signer on it for 3 years. I deposited every paycheck into it for 3 years. The balance was zero. $91,000 gone. Withdrawn in 2 transactions. The night before my surgery, I asked the bank representative to confirm the date of the withdrawals. She said, the transactions were initiated on February 14th at 11:47 p.m. Valentine's Day. While I was in the operating room, my heart being restarted by strangers, Marcus was at an ATM emptying our life. I hung up the phone. I looked at the ceiling of that hospital room, the bland cream-colored tiles, the fluorescent light humming above me, and I understood something for the first time. He had planned for me not to wake up. The canceled insurance, the empty account, the vanishing act. None of it was reactive. None of it was panic. He had done this before I went under because he expected me to never come out. I was supposed to die on that operating table. And somehow impossibly I hadn't. I lay there for a long time after that. Not crying, just thinking. I had survived 2 cardiac arrests. I had survived 6 months of something I didn't yet know the name of. I had survived Marcus Hargrove. I just didn't know yet how completely I was about to outlive him.
Ties.
Silver hair, a navy suit that had been expensive once. He carried a black leather briefcase, and he moved like someone who had rehearsed this moment many times in his head. He stopped at the foot of my bed. "Miss Hargrove," he said, not Mrs., which I noticed. "My name is Theodore Langley. I'm a senior partner at Langley and Associates in Boston. I have been looking for you for 11 years. I thought he was in the wrong room. I think you might have me confused with someone else," I said. He sat down in the chair beside my bed without being invited. He set his briefcase on his knees, clicked it open, and placed a document in front of me. At the top, in clean serif type, were the words, "Ellison Vance Family Trust Heir Identification Proceedings." "Miss Hargrove," he said carefully, "your birth name is Sophia Eleanor Ellison Vance. You were born in Harwich, Massachusetts, on March 3rd, 1993, to Catherine and Edmund Ellison Vance III. I hadn't heard the name Ellison Vance in my life. You are the sole surviving heir to the Ellison Vance Family Trust, he continued. As of today, that trust is valued at $387 million. I heard the number, and then I genuinely thought I was dreaming. I was sedated for much of my recovery, on and off. There were times I'd wake up and think I could smell my classroom, hear my students. I thought this was one of those. But Theodore kept talking, and the document under my hand kept being real, and eventually I understood that I was awake. Here is what he told me. When I was 2 years old, my mother was driving through a November rainstorm on a Massachusetts highway. There was a multi-car collision. She was killed on impact. I was thrown from the vehicle on impact. I was found by first responders nearly 100 yards from the wreck alive, but unconscious. I was taken to a small regional hospital 8 miles from where the accident occurred. My mother was taken to the main trauma center in the city. 2 different hospitals. 2 different systems. And in the chaos of a multi-car accident on a flooded highway, no one connected the infant in Harwich to the woman who had died in Boston. I was listed as a Jane Doe. By the time my father Edmund Ellison Vance received word that his wife had died, his daughter was already in the foster care system under a different name. He searched. Theodore told me this with a steadiness that cracked only slightly at this part. Your father searched for you for the rest of his life. He hired investigators. He pursued every lead. He never stopped believing you were alive. Edmund Ellison Vance died 14 months before Theodore found me. He never knew I was in Portland. He never knew I painted my walls yellow. He never knew I became a teacher, that I loved art the way he had, that I had his eyes, that I talked to my plants when I was lonely. He never knew. I asked Theodore to leave the room for a few minutes. And then I cried. Not because of the money. Because somewhere in Massachusetts, a man had spent 30 years looking for me, and I had been right here the whole time. 30 years. And Theodore we had just left the room when Dr. Reena Patel knocked on my door. She was my cardiologist, the surgeon who had been managing my recovery. Sharp, precise, someone who chose her words the way a carpenter chooses tools. She sat down across from me and she said, Sophia, I need to discuss your toxicology results with you. I remember the way she said discuss instead of share or go over. Discuss. Like this was going to require processing. Your extended panel came back this morning, she said. We found elevated levels of a compound called oleandrin in your bloodstream. I didn't know what oleandrin was. She explained it to me carefully, the way doctors explain things when they know the information is going to change your life. Oleandrin is a cardiac glycoside, a naturally occurring toxic compound found in the oleander plant. It interferes with the heart's electrical system. It slows the signals that tell your heart to beat in rhythm. In large doses, it kills quickly. In small doses, administered consistently over time, it destroys the heart slowly, like erosion. It mimics natural cardiac deterioration. It looks to a doctor who isn't specifically testing for it, like a congenital condition, something you were born with, something that simply got worse. It dissolves completely in warm liquid. No taste. No smell. Nothing. Dr. Patel told me the levels in my blood indicated I had been ingesting it consistently for approximately 4 to 6 months. 4 to 6 months. I sat very still while she talked. I thought about every single night. The mug set on my nightstand. The shoulder squeeze. You work too hard. The warmth of it in my hands. Sleep well. Every night. Every night. Every single night. The man I married carried a cup of something beautiful smelling and set it in front of me and watched me drink it. And smiled. Dr. Patel asked me if I had any idea how the compound could have gotten into my system. Yes, I said. My voice was very steady. I surprised myself. I think I know exactly how. She gave me a notepad. I started writing down dates. Conversations. The name of the herbal tea brand he always bought. The nights he'd been unusually insistent when I said I was too tired for tea. The 2 occasions I hadn't finished the cup and he'd looked at me with something I'd interpreted as disappointment. It wasn't disappointment. It was recalculation. I wrote for almost an hour. And when I finished, I had 4 pages of notes and the kind of clarity that only comes when something you've been refusing to see finally comes fully into focus. He hadn't snapped. He hadn't been pushed to a breaking point. He had sat across a dinner table from me, looked me in the eyes, planned this, researched it, purchased it, implemented it, and then made me chamomile tea every single night while asking about my students by name. That is what I had married. That is what I had slept next to. That is what I had loved. Theodore's firm brought in a private investigator named James Mercer. The Portland Police Department assigned a Detective Amara Okafor to my case. And what they uncovered over the next 8 weeks was, in retrospect, almost insulting in its sloppiness. Marcus was meticulous about the poison. He was catastrophically careless about everything else. The first thing they found was a secondary credit card. Marcus had opened it 6 months before my surgery under a slight variation of his name, Marcus T. Hargrove instead of Marcus J. He had forgotten, when he emptied our accounts and fled, that I had been listed as an authorized user on that account as well, which meant the statements still came to our old address, which meant the Postal Service forwarded them to the hospital's patient mail service, which meant I held them in my hands 6 weeks after I should have died. On that card, a purchase from an herbal supply website, dried botanical extracts, shipped to a P.O. box 3 miles from our apartment, paid for 11 months ago. The website, when Mercer contacted them, confirmed the order. Dried oleander leaf, 1 pound. Ordered and delivered to a name that matched the P.O. box registration. Marcus's handwriting. The second thing they found was his laptop. He had left it. In the rush to leave, or perhaps in the arrogance of certainty that I would not be alive to investigate anything, he left it in the closet of our apartment. The search history was a 5-month chronicle of premeditated murder, untraceable cardiac toxins, symptoms of oleander poisoning, how long until oleander exposure is fatal, natural-looking cardiac death, how to cancel a spouse's insurance policy, joint account early termination, page after page. Right there. In the browser he used to also search for restaurant reservations and Portland Trailblazers scores. The third thing, the thing that turned a murder case into a conspiracy, was the woman who had answered his phone. Her name was Cassandra Dumont. She and Marcus had been together for nearly 2 years. And her older sister was Victoria Dumont, Senior Vice President of Claims Administration at Meridian Shield Insurance, the same company that insured me. The same division that had canceled my policy 48 hours before my surgery. Victoria had personally signed off on the cancellation. The internal paperwork, pulled in discovery, showed she had flagged my file and overridden the standard 30-day notice period. I was removed from my policy silently, with 0 notification, while I was already experiencing cardiac symptoms Marcus had spent months causing. There was a text message chain between Marcus and Cassandra, recovered from his phone. 2 days before my surgery. Cassandra, how long do we wait? I can't keep doing this. Marcus, not long now. 3 words. That is what my life was worth to the man who made my tea. Not long now. I read that text message in a hospital bed, 3 weeks post-surgery, with a scar on my chest and a trust fund in my name. And I made a decision. If Marcus wanted to gamble on my not surviving, he was going to find out exactly what it cost him to lose. I want to tell you about the moment I became myself. Not the legal moment, not the day the trust was formally transferred, not the morning I signed the documents that changed my name. The real moment. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about 5 weeks into my recovery. Theodore had arranged for me to be transferred to a private room at a better-equipped facility in Boston closer to the legal proceedings and, he said quietly, closer to where I was from. He brought me something on that Tuesday. A box. Old, cream-colored cardboard, tied with string. Inside were letters. 30 years of letters. My father had written to me. Not to a specific address, he didn't have one. He had written to me the way you write to someone when you don't know where they are, but you refuse to stop talking to them anyway. Each letter was dated. Each one started the same way. My darling Sophia, wherever you are. He wrote about the house. About the garden. About the way the light came through the library windows in the morning. He wrote about her, my mother, and how much I looked like her in the photograph from that night. He wrote about the things he wanted to teach me. How to ride. how to sail, his mother's lemon cake recipe. He wrote about the foundation he'd started in her name, about the work he hoped I would carry on. The last letter was dated 6 weeks before he died. It said, "I still believe you are out there. I still believe we will find each other. I am very tired now, my darling, but I am not giving up. I will never give up. You are loved more than you know, more than I can put into these pages, and one day you will feel that. I promise you that." I sat in that hospital room for a long time after I read that. Then I got up. I called Theodore. I said, "I want to see the estate." He said, "Of course, whenever you're ready." I said, "I'm ready now." That was the moment. Not the money, not the justice that was coming. Just a box of letters from a man who never stopped looking. That was the moment I stopped being someone Marcus almost destroyed and started being someone my father had always known existed. 8 months after I collapsed in my classroom, I walked into the Ellison Vance Foundation annual gala at the Whitmore Hotel in Boston. I wore midnight blue, my grandmother's pearl earrings, found in a velvet box in the estate's master bedroom, and heels that were slightly higher than practical because I wanted to feel tall. The room was full, philanthropists, doctors, foundation partners, media. And seated at table 7, as a representative of one of the gala's corporate donors, Victoria Dumont. She didn't know I knew who she was. She didn't know what was about to happen. I gave my remarks. I thanked the donors. I spoke about my father's legacy. I talked about the cardiac research initiative the foundation was expanding. And then I paused. I took a breath. And I looked directly at table 7. I also want to take a moment to acknowledge Meridian Shield Insurance, whose representative Victoria Dumont is with us tonight. Victoria personally approved the cancellation of my health insurance policy while I was in cardiac surgery that, the investigation would later reveal, was necessary because someone had been poisoning me for 6 months. Victoria's sister, Cassandra, was the woman who helped that person disappear. I want the people in this room, many of whom are Meridian Shield policyholders or know someone who is, to have that context. I let it sit. As of last week, the Ellison Vance Trust became the majority shareholder in Meridian Shield's parent holding company. We have initiated a full ethics investigation of their claims division. We have identified 23 additional policyholders whose claims were wrongfully denied under similar circumstances. 3 of those individuals did not survive. Victoria Dumont stood up. 17 years. Victoria Dumont. Insurance fraud, obstruction of justice, and 3 counts of negligent homicide for the policyholders who died after wrongful claim denials. Federal charges. Still pending at sentencing. Her attorneys expect she will serve a minimum of 12 years. At Marcus's sentencing, I was given the opportunity to submit a written statement. I kept it short. I said, "You chose me because you thought I was alone. You thought there was no one who would come looking, no one who would fight back, no history that made me matter beyond what I could provide you. You were wrong about every part of that. I had a father who spent 30 years looking for me. I had a classroom full of children who called an ambulance. I had a doctor who ran 1 extra test. I had a stranger with a briefcase who flew across the country to find me. I was never as alone as you needed me to be. I hope you think about that for a long time." I did not cry when they took him out of the courtroom. I think I was done grieving Marcus Hargrove a long time before that day. What you grieve, I've learned, isn't the person who hurt you. It's the person you were before you knew they could. Last April, I broke ground on the Eleanor Ellison Vance Pediatric Cardiac Center at Massachusetts General Hospital, named after my mother, the woman who died on a rainy highway so that I could be thrown clear. The wing is dedicated to patients whose cardiac illness was caused or accelerated by toxic exposure. It includes a victim advocacy unit, a team of legal and insurance specialists whose only job is to make sure that not a single patient in a cardiac crisis loses their insurance coverage while they're fighting for their life. We also fund a foster care alumni support program through the foundation. Because I remember being 18 with 1 suitcase, and I know what it would have meant to have someone in my corner. I still teach. On Saturday mornings, I teach art to children recovering from heart surgery in the new wing. They're small and they're tired sometimes, and they have bandages in places children shouldn't have bandages. But they paint. They paint so much. Suns and dogs and houses with chimneys and flowers that are bigger than the sky. Little Amara, my student, the one with the glitter on her nose, she sends me drawings in the mail sometimes. She's in 2nd grade now. Last month she sent me a drawing of a woman in a blue dress. At the bottom, in crayon, she wrote, "This is my teacher. She is brave."
Brave.
She spelled it with A-W. I have it on my refrigerator. I make my own tea now. Just chamomile. And I drink it by the window every morning, alone and completely at peace, and I think about my father writing letters to someone he couldn't find. I think about how he never gave up. I think about how, in the end, neither did I. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you.
Genuinely.
This one took a long time to tell, and I hope it was worth your time. If something in this story moved you, please hit the like button. It sounds small, but it helps this video reach more people who might need it today. Subscribe if you're new. We tell stories like this one, stories about people who weren't supposed to survive, and did anyway. And drop a comment below. Tell me, what part of this stayed with you? I read every single one. Take care of yourself out there. And if someone is making you tea every night, maybe just make your own sometimes. See you in the next one.